Welcome again, friends, to another episode of Soaring Through Chaos. Yes, we are again in chaotic times, and looks like the second wave of Corona is starting now. So I'm again calling upon more friends who have been through challenging times and who, to me, are like role models who have been through some of the most interesting times and yet found ways to go ahead and do good things. So with me is a friend, Tushar Arun Gandhi. Tusharji, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got on the journey of wanting to do things for people or to do social work?
Well, I think the for me it was a fait accompli because of my legacy. I was expected to be in this in this segment of life, and I realized that being able to do things for others was much more gratifying than living a life which was only self-serving. And even here, it is self-serving because the satisfaction that you get cannot be evaluated in terms of monies and things. And so I think it's easy for me to be able to be in this kind of a situation.
And honestly, I mean, I got to know of you because of your posts on social media. It was very inspiring. And then I found out that somehow there is a social connection. I mean, and I made my way to your home. And you
Yes.
really inspired me when I came to your home 2 years ago, asking for suggestions on how to work in the social sector in India. It's not easy with all the chaos that we see, and that's not related to the corona. There's always some chaos in India. How have you been, given the fact the legacy being the great grandson of Mahatma Gandhi? What kind of responsibilities or what kind of expectations do you have to deal with when you're working in the social sector?
Well, there are quite natural expectations, and also people want to associate with the name rather than with me or my abilities. But if one understands those compulsions of people, it becomes much easier to work with that knowledge that most of the time the reverence is not for me but for the legacy I represent. And I have never felt as if the legacy was overbearing or overpowering for me. I realize how important it is for the cause or for the people who want to get associated with that name. And as long as I find common grounds, I don't mind if my legacy benefits those people or their causes. So it's been much easier for me. Of course, one has to live with that knowledge that if I didn't have the legacy, they wouldn't even give me the time of the day.
Wow, that's true. In fact, my job is much easier. My legacy is that my father worked for the post office, and so
Yes.
expectations are very low. So anything I do is a bonus.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, what is your area of focus now? Or what have you been working on lately? What are the things that there's so many open issues. What are the things that you have been working on?
Well, I think I am like a cause butterfly. I fleet from cause to cause because there's so many things that need to be done over here. I think at the present moment, the most important thing is trying to uh, steer the course of the humanity of my nation, which is, I think, more or less like a rudderless ship in a storm. And but my favorite causes have always been to do with rural populace and the villages of India, which were dear to Bapu also. And so mostly the causes I associate with are pertaining to something or the other, some aspect or the other of the rural society of India. But as I said, I'm also concerned about the overall health, and when I say health, the moral health of my nation and humanity in general. So I concentrate much more on that. And in times like these, when internationally there is so much hatred going around in the world, working against hate has always been something that has been very important to me. Unfortunately, these days, the general reaction to hate is with hate in return. And I feel that that is more dangerous than hatred from a certain group of people, only because we are all just cumulatively adding to the hate in our society. And I think the time has come when we need to work for healing, when we need to heal this society, and healing will only happen if we lessen the hate in our society. So that is also something that I like to work with in the present circumstances, especially when we are so isolated.
Yeah, in fact, one memorable statement that I remember from my childhood by your great grandfather was, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." And
Yeah,
because I think this concept of, I mean, the true concept of ahimsa, which is not using any kind of violence in protesting, even violence, um, to not use force to deal with force, which is
right.
probably the greatest thing I found in the teachings of and the actual living. He lived his life like that. Um, what's going on now? I mean, I see India today is much more revengeful, if you will. I won't say violent as much, but definitely there's a lot more revengefulness in the air and like wanting to punish different groups. What's going on? I just don't understand it. I've been away for too long outside India.
Well, I think we have become a spiteful people, and I will disagree with your statement that we are not violent. We may not appear to be violent because we're not fighting, physically fighting each other, but the violence of thought and the violence of prejudices is much more insidious than the stray incidents of violent behavior, as in fights or killings and things. Because with our thought, we keep encouraging those few who take things in their hands and go out and kill people. And so I think the effect of violence of thought is much greater on our society in humankind. And so I believe that India has become a nation or a culture of violence, of prejudices, of deceit. And I think we need to understand, accept that, and start working to lessen that aspect amongst us in our individual selves. It has to begin with ourselves, not expect the others to change first. Unless we change, our attitudes change, it's not going to make a difference. And uh, non-violence was not something that Bapu invented. In this land, non-violence has been a ideology from even before the times of Buddha and Mahavira. And so it is the ancient wisdom that we need to return to. And unfortunately, we are more keen to return to the ancient prejudices and bigotry in our society instead of the ancient wisdom of our elders and our icons. That needs to change.
In fact, I mean, I see that all the time. I was a teacher of what Sanatan Dharma when I was a teacher for young children at the Chinmaya Mission for 3 years in San Francisco. And time and again, the idea of reciprocity, the idea of whatever do unto others as you would have do unto you, is there in every religion. It's not definitely
Yes.
not only in Hindu or in Buddhist, but it's there in every religion. Is the
Yes.
basis of religion really that you
Absolutely.
would not hurt others because you don't want to be hurt either. But
Yeah.
something has shifted in our DNA, and there seems to be like a competitive spirit. Oh, the West is aggressive, so we should be aggressive too. And I'm
Yes.
like, but the aggression in the West does not help people. In fact, the
Hmm.
West is realizing its mistakes. I mean, I can say that for myself. Many of my mentors, teachers, scientists are saying that we lost compassion and we became
Yes.
inhuman. So, what's going on here? Is it possible for us to regain that in our psyche and to understand the true meaning of religion or spirituality and the true meaning of being human?
I think the problem with us is we have gone too much into the ritualistic practice of religion instead of the spiritual acceptance of religion. And so we merely practice the rituals and the traditions. And in doing that, we embrace even the bad traditions that need to be discarded. We have to understand the spirituality of religion and not just the practice of religion. Unfortunately, what has happened in all religions is that the agents of religion, as I call them, the clergy, to maintain their dominance over religion, have always taught us to fear God, not love Him or understand Him, but to fear God. And even the practice of religion is supposed to be out of the fear of the wrath of God. Because if we don't practice according to the methods given, then the wrath of God will fall on us, and we will be punished and penalized. And so, out of that fear, we do it. It's like following a recipe for a cake. 1 ounce here or there, and the cake will flop. And so the fear of the flopped cake is so much that we follow the recipe when even our own wisdom tells us that maybe we can do it a different way, but we won't go outside of the word. And in religion also that has been done. And we only practice religion out of fear, not out of love, not out of understanding. And that unless that changes, we are not going to be able to make a difference.
Indeed, indeed. In fact, I keep hearing with the pandemic right now, it's almost like people are saying that this coronavirus is a punishment for people who didn't behave right.
Right.
What's your take on that? I mean, nobody, I don't want to even say one party created it and somebody else is spreading it. It is spreading. The
Yeah.
reality is it is spreading. But what could
The
be a meaningful way of looking at the pandemic and how to grow through this pandemic?
Well, I think even in this pandemic, we have to find out our own contribution to its spread. Why has it become so rampant? Why is it so easily being spread? What is it that we ourselves have to change? You see, the thing is that people who have understood that role are secure from that in a greater number than those who attributed to divine retribution, who attributed कि भाई, this is the punishment for our sins. And that's why we are also looking for miracle cures. I'm surprised that no godman uh, Jyotish has come out with a stone which will ward off corona. He would become a billionaire if that was, because everybody would make a beeline to get a ring or a pendant or a ear stud out of that stone, thinking that the stone will save them from the virus. And that is the problem. We have stopped being rational in our behavior. If rationality comes in, then we will understand our own culpability in all these things. And unless that happens, unless we are honestly able to sit back and say, look, this is, even if it is minuscule, this is my contribution to this problem. And if I were to remove that contribution, it will make a difference. See, we don't realize how much of a difference we can make to a situation. We keep thinking that we are insignificant in the larger design of things, and so we are not responsible.
True, true. In fact, that I see acutely. There's this feeling of helplessness in many people. There's a feeling of, oh, the government is not doing this, the government is not doing that, or what can I do? I mean, I'm taking care of myself or my family, but it's almost like that victim mentality is getting stronger, not just in India, but literally around the world. But do you have any suggestions on how people can view it differently? What else could they be doing to get out of this victim mentality and say, I'm going to take some responsibility and I'm going to do something more meaningful?
I think what has happened is, the last 3 months, we've all taken this forced isolation as a punishment.
True,
We don't
true.
look at it. We don't look at it as an opportunity for us to be able to achieve things that generally we have not been able to do, making the excuse of being hectic schedules and responsibilities and things. Just now, when we have the opportunity of the luxury of time, when we don't have anything else to do, are we putting that to productive use, or how many of us are you putting that to productive use? Everybody is moping around and saying, oh, we've been punished, it's isolation, we are imprisoned, and we can't, we are so helpless about it. But there are so many opportunities that we can do things for ourselves, we can do things for others, for the society, even while we are isolated. And things, even the sharing of thought is so important. But because we are treating this as retribution and punishment, we are saying, no, no, then in that case, I can't do anything. I have to be isolated, I have to be within myself, and we're wasting this time. So much time to do something good and productive, even if we do it with just a selfish motive of doing things that we haven't done because we thought we were so busy. And the one thing that I have realized in these last 3 months is that so much time of leisure is also so short. If we don't utilize it productively, it just goes away with us doing nothing about it. It's not only when you're busy that the time flies, but when you're
That's true.
lazy, also time flies.
That's true. That's true. In fact, I was, in some ways, I was lucky. I was in Mexico when the lockdown happened, both here as well as in California. We had the shelter in place in California, and I didn't want to go either places with so much chaos going on. Uh, California handled it quite well, and so was the lockdown, but there were challenges. There were many
Yes.
challenges on both sides. But in Mexico, I
The
was.
greatest, the greatest challenge in the US is in the White House.
Yes. And trying to whitewash the whole situation, which hasn't been easy at all. And it continues to be a challenge. Out here, there have been challenges with the large number of people, the difficulty in social isolation or even keeping distance, or the migrant workers. We have had many challenges, but I
Yes.
think the NGOs have stepped up in many cases. Um, as an individual, yeah, I've been feeling compelled to do something, but still, the best I've done is have these talks and also just discipline myself. But there's so much pent up energy, and I know a lot of people have that pent up energy saying, what can we do next? Probably the best examples are is our like friends like Vibhuti Patel, who have been working on food security in the metros where there's a big need. Are there things people can do? Uh, of course, the most obvious things are helping people around when we are secure to ensure that other people around are secure. What else do you have any suggestions on what can be done under the circumstances?
No, I think my suggestion is whatever one is capable of doing, which is beyond just serving oneself or one's family, is most welcome and most important in such times. Generally, we're all so much into our own ego thing that we want to do matters of global importance. We want to make a change global, but that's not really required. Making a difference to even just one life. Like in my normal times, I set very low goals for myself and say that if I can just make one person smile from the heart one day, I would be doing much better than not being able to do that. And so, even those kind of insignificant things in these days, in these times which are so trying for us, everybody, uh, for mental health, for physical health, for the common well-being, and all these, in all these situations, I think what we need to understand is no action is insignificant, and do it with that knowledge that it will make a difference to something. The other thing that we have to also go beyond now is being compassionate only for the human race.
True,
I think the time has come when we need to be compassionate about life in general and respect all life forms and realize that all of them have the right. If you look at the last 3 months, and if you look, I walk on my terrace every evening. And we are fortunate that we have a very dense foliage even while living in Mumbai. And I see the avian life that is prospering while the human interference is at the least. And that
true,
realization that how much that is important too is also something that we must understand, that even life forms that we don't accept as life matter, and we need to respect them. If we come to that knowledge, I think half our problems will be solved.
true, true. In fact, yeah, I mean, the pictures of Bombay, the pictures of many of these cities have changed. The whole landscape, even the skies, the bluer skies, a lot of
Yes,
things have changed. And
yes,
that that's a reminder that even things that sustain life need to be respected.
absolutely.
And whether it's water resources, the pollution that we create by unnecessary driving, and the congestion that has occurred. Not easy
Hmm.
in a country like India where we have so many people. It's not easy, but I think it is doable. And if each one does our fair share, one of the things that's been bugging me personally is there's been a lot of bashing of people who have done good things for the country, including the defacing of Mahatma Gandhi statues. Um, for me, it hurts because not as much the statue, but what he stood for, what I learned from Gandhi's teachings. And what about you, being from the lineage, from the family? How do you feel about that? And do you have any suggestion to people?
Well, initially in my life, I used to be very hurt when Bapu used to be maligned or his images insulted. But then I realized that those were just images and they didn't matter at all. So I have now come to the point of view that if it helps in lessening the anger and violence, then I would prefer that they, destroy all his images and all his statues rather than even go and hurt a living soul or life form. And so I have been advocating it very much. And then at the same breath, I'm saying that once you use his image to vent your anger and resentment. Can we get together and use his philosophy to heal this society, this civilization that has become so unjust and unfair? And can we use his legacy to bring about that healing? It is much more important that we use the ideology and the legacy. And that's where I also want to uh, popularize the knowledge that it wasn't his invention. His ideology or his practices weren't his invention. They are the wisdom of life itself on earth. The reason that life evolved, the reason that life has sustained for so long. And so, even if you don't want to acknowledge him as the icon of that ideology, the ideology matters. And if we work with that ideology, some way or the other, his legacy will also continue. And so, I believe very strongly that although I prefer that his image lives in my heart and in the hearts of people. If the statues and photographs are destroyed, I am not bothered.
In fact, I remember while studying a little bit about Buddhism, Buddha said again and again that he was just human, that his achievements were something anybody could do, and that there
Yes,
were many Buddhas before him, there'll be many after him. And he tried to minimize the idea of idol worship. And
yes.
yeah, on one hand, we have people who use Gandhi as an idol and worship him. On the other hand, there are people who deface him. But probably, as the Buddha said, what is more important is to look at the values. And I see a divergence. I see even in myself. When I come to India, there's this palpable feeling of hyper competitiveness, and I don't know how to even describe it. I feel there's more competition in India right now. Maybe because there are too many people. Maybe because there are not enough resources. I don't know. Is it really the physical world that's making us like that? Or is it our perception of the physical world? I don't really
I
know.
I think it is the way we are made brought up right from our birth. We are always told that this is a competitive world, and unless we run the marathon to win it, we're going to be the has-beens who are going to be left behind in everything we do. The competitiveness starts with siblings. You're competing with your siblings for the affection of your parents. You're competing with your siblings for the resources of the family. So we are taught to compete right from the time of the birth, and it's not Indianness itself. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
worldwide thing, and that is where we have failed to realize that the essence of competition is to help those weaker than us to be able to finish with us and not being merely the first on the podium kind of thing, because that is momentary. The day you're dethroned, somebody else does a better time, even your records are forgotten.
That's true.
Only till they last they remember you. Otherwise, the current holder of the records is the one who's eulogized. But if you help somebody who doesn't have a chance to finish that race and help that person to finish that race, your deed will be remembered forever. If not by the whole humankind, by that person you helped across the finishing line. And that is much more lasting than ever. But we don't feel that that is important enough. We have been so programmed to be first across the finish line that we don't understand the importance of having the most across the finish line uh, ideology.
True, true. In fact, uh, one of the things that changed in my life once I got into the 40s was exactly that. I was a big believer in winning. And it's so isolating, isn't it? When
It
we
is.
win alone, and a point comes where we are even fighting with our own families, as you said, not just
Yes.
as children, but even in adulthood. We are competing for attention, we are competing for recognition, we're competing for how we look rather than the essence of it, which is it's like Robinson Crusoe being thrown on an island with $1 million. What will that $1 million do? Uh,
Absolutely.
and yeah, the cooperation rather than competition can lead to much more valuable,
Yes.
results in all of us coming together. In your own life, have you seen a shift in, as you, have been in this field of helping others? Have you seen a shift in how you have dealt with problems over a period of time?
I consider myself to be a learner. And so life keeps teaching me, making me first aware of my shortcomings, and then sometimes helping me to conquer those shortcomings and come over it. Not always. I won't consider myself to be a completely fulfilled human. I believe that till my last breath, I will be a learner. And so I'm learning the facts of life with time. Experience is one of the greatest teachers. So I believe my journey will never end. The day the journey ends, this life will not matter.
In fact, one of my friends, when I was asking about the challenges that we are all facing, was saying, "Aren't you glad there are real challenges to be faced? If everything was perfect, if we were in quote unquote heaven, if there were no
Yeah.
problems with leadership, if there were no problems with resources, we would get bored." So, given
Yeah.
the number of challenges we are facing, I guess probably prioritizing matters, probably looking at how, what in Sanskrit they call it Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, how we can all bring it together matters. Do you have
Absolutely.
any of your last words of wisdom as to for the younger generation? Because I feel a lot of young people ask for um, like there's a need for finding meaning in their life. A lot of people are disillusioned now, not just in India, literally around the world. Do you have any suggestions on how they can become lifelong learners?
Well, I think the humility of under realizing that one is never going to be complete is something that is important, because we generally are very complacent about our achievements. We think we've achieved things and we no longer need to seek anything more. And that is when life starts stagnating and becoming boring. And so I believe that we have to shun that belief of complacence that comes in, because as we used to say in our ancient wisdom, that stagnant waters start putrefying, and it's only running waters that are vital and purer than the stagnant waters. And so I think we need to also realize that stagnancy is something that we need to avoid. And young people get this feeling of complacence. I'm not talking about the young. I'm talking about the people who are just about to become middle-aged. The complacence in them is what harms them the most, because once they are past middle age, they realize that what the goals they were running behind before did not really mean much, and that is when the frustrations start uh, cropping in. And so I think that realization that we are never going to be complete, and and life gives us an opportunity to be seekers all the time. If we exploit that opportunity, we become much better than if we just sit back and say, "Hey, I reached my goals, I've reached my destination." Because if you reach your destination, then what are you going to do the rest of your life? You might as well be dead.
So true, so true. I went through that phase 5 years ago, and that's what brought me back to India. That's what brought me out of Silicon Valley. because I felt there wasn't much more to do. Technology is so good now. You and I are able to talk like this, literally
Yes.
from across. I could be on the other side of the world. I was
Yes.
talking to
Just the
people.
other day, I was talking to people who I realized were all from all over America and the continent. And I was sitting in my bedroom in Mumbai and was almost speaking to a global selection of people. The real world would never have allowed me that opportunity.
Yeah, so there's a proliferation of technology. There's so much already done. Utilizing that can be a big goal. We can, I
Yes.
mean, you can teach people language, or you can even learn from each other just by being online. I've been learning Spanish that way. I've been
Yes.
learning even live streaming, having discussions with people like you, which has been very fulfilling for me. And I'm so grateful that you made the time to discuss, to even talk about some of the challenges we are facing and what can potentially be done. Do you have any last words before we close?
No, thanks, Shankar. Thank you for this opportunity. And I hope that this message means something of significance to people.
Yeah, and I will definitely drop by. It's been more than 2 years since I met, the only time I've met you. It was very
Most welcome.
inspiring to focus on what's important and to focus on what can be done rather than to easily get carried away with what's wrong, you know? So
Yeah.
thank you for that inspiration.
Thank you, Shankar. Thank you for this opportunity.
And to everybody here, it's time to say goodbye. But if there's anything we can talk about more, I will also share Tushar Bhai's contact so that what would be the best way for people to reach you?
Well, they can, you can share my number. They
Or,
can
or
call
Facebook?
me or contact me or Facebook. Facebook, I cannot accept any more friends now because Facebook, Zuckerberg doesn't allow you. He believes that there are only a certain number of friends that you can have. And I've reached that limit. But we can always communicate on the communication softwares that are
Great, great. And I will share that. And again, thank you for your time. And I'm feeling blessed that at least I got a second chance to meet you, this time virtually.
available.
So,
Yes. Thank
and we
you,
will meet
Shankar.
again on social media.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's
Thank
time
you,
to say
Shankar.
goodbye, but please stay in touch.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes. Bye bye.